This chart behind me shows a typical generation curve for a 3 kilowatt rooftop solar PV system. And it's been overlaid over a typical load curve for a typical household. Now, when we look at the bell curve in the middle, that's the generation curve. And it's very typical for a solar PV system to see a bell curve like that, because when you think about it, in the morning, the sun starts to rise, the system starts to generate power, and it goes up to a peak in the middle of the day when the sun's at its highest. And beyond that point, it starts to decrease again as the sun moves towards the westerly horizon. So a bell curve is a very normal thing. But when we look at the load curve, we can see that these two curves are almost entirely out of phase with each other. And what I mean by that is, if we look at the low point in the middle of the day for the load, it coincides with a maximum for the solar generator. Now, this part of the load curve is often called a duck curve, particularly by grid operators, and it's something that keeps them awake at night right now. And the reason for that is because it's getting worse. The duck is getting fatter. In fact, he's developing more of a paunch, which sometimes happens when you get older. And that means that the gap between the minimum load and the maximum generation is growing, it's widening. And potentially, if it gets too far apart, it could destabilize the grid. So this is a serious problem. So what's the solution to this? Well, some of the smartest minds in our country are applying themselves to that very question, and I don't propose to have a solution. But if we bring it back home to our rooftop solar system, there is a clear solution, and that is to install some form of storage. And the most accessible form of storage we have is probably batteries. Now, I want to state up front that batteries are expensive and they have a long payback period. So if you don't have the appetite for that sort of investment, then this information is probably not much use to you. And I would suggest that you're probably best just to stick with a solar PV system on the roof that covers your daytime usage, and that would be sufficient. However, for me, a battery meets other goals that are not necessarily financial. So the first one, and I've mentioned this before, is that my overall mission is to reduce my carbon footprint and get it down to 0 or less. Now, the only way I can do that is to find an energy source that covers my usage at night and doesn't involve the grid, which basically means a battery. The second priority for me is energy security. In my area, we quite often get blackouts. And by having a battery system, it means that my household appliances can be backed up with energy when the grid is offline. So I don't need to worry about food spoilage or groping around in the dark. Everything will keep working. Well, nearly everything, except for my air conditioner, will keep running during a blackout. And the third priority is something that more relates to my stage in life. You see, I'm close to retirement. And when I'm retired, the last thing I want is to get a bill shock from my energy company that's just put my rates up another 20%. This is not a joke. Over the last couple of years, we've seen energy prices go up in Australia by 20% per annum. And that is way more than the inflation rate, which itself at the moment is very high. So by installing a battery now and paying for it while I'm still working, what I'm effectively doing is pre-purchasing my energy out into the future. So my future self will be using energy that's already paid for at a known price. And that gives me peace of mind when I'm approaching retirement. It's hard to put a value on that, what price peace of mind, but to me, it's worth a lot. So what are the options when it comes to choosing a battery for your home? I chose a Tesla Powerwall, but there are many other choices, including BYD, Sungrow, Sonnen, and even Australian options like Redflow Energy's product. And they're all good products. They use different chemistry, but they all work very well. However, there is a fork in the road when it comes to deciding how your battery system will integrate with your home. Basically, there are two types of architecture. There's the AC coupled system and a DC coupled system. Let me explain. I'll start with the DC coupled system. So at the heart of this system is a hybrid inverter. Now the hybrid inverter can do exactly the same thing as a normal string inverter, but it does a bit more than that. So a string inverter will take the DC current from your solar panels and it will convert it to AC current, which is then usable by the appliances in your home. But in addition to that, a hybrid inverter can also allow that DC current to pass through to the battery, where the battery charge controller can use that current to charge your battery, because of course a battery is a DC device. Also, the hybrid inverter can then take energy from the grid, AC current, and convert that to DC current and pass that through to the battery, which can also be used to charge the battery. And lastly, the hybrid inverter can take DC current from the battery, convert it to AC and make it usable to your home. So you can see that a hybrid inverter is quite a bit more complex and has greater utility than a standard string inverter. But it also comes at a higher cost. It typically will cost you twice the price for a hybrid inverter as you would pay for a standard string inverter. So that's important to note. This is a Tesla Powerwall Model 2, and it is an AC coupled battery system. What that means is, if I take the covers off here and we look inside, what we would find is a bank of lithium-ion batteries that can store 13.5 kilowatt hours of energy. But also inside there we would find an inverter, and it's a hybrid type inverter. It can convert that DC current into AC current and then via my switchboard provide energy to my household appliances. It can also work the other way, so it can take current from the grid, AC, convert it to DC and make that available to the charge controller in here so that the batteries can be charged from the grid. And so importantly, this system can work as a standalone unit. You don't need to have any other inverters, you don't even need to have solar panels. You can buy one of these and just hook it straight into your switchboard, and it will be able to back up your household power, and it will also enable you to buy cheap energy. If you're on a time of use plan, you can use this to buy energy when it's cheap in the night and then use that stored energy in the peak hours when there's peak tariffs to lower your cost of energy. Inside there, that inverter is a 5 kilowatt inverter. So that limits the rate at which it can charge and discharge. So the maximum rate it can charge is 5 kilowatts, and the maximum rate it can discharge is also 5 kilowatts. So which battery system is best, the AC or the DC coupled? And what's the best size for your house? Well, dealing with the first question, when I started looking at these, I thought, gee, they're very expensive, these Powerwalls. But then when I came to realise that they incorporate an inverter that you would otherwise have to pay for, well, when you do the maths, it turns out that they're roughly the same price as any other system that incorporates a hybrid inverter. So price isn't a great differentiator. In terms of size, when we looked at solar panels alone, I said back then that typically a household would have 50% of its energy usage in the day and 50% at night, and so we decided to size the solar PV system to the daytime use, being 50% of your average daily use. So then your battery would be sized to deal with the other 50% of your energy use. So in that example I gave in an earlier video, we were looking at a house that used 20 kilowatt hours a day, and we said 10 kilowatts would be daytime. So therefore 10 kilowatts would be the nighttime use. And so we'd want to be able to have a battery that can support at least 10 kilowatt hours of energy use. And this battery system is a 13.5 kilowatt hour system. That's the maximum capacity. But you never want to fully deplete your battery, because you might find yourself in a blackout and not have any energy left. So typically you'll probably only use 10 kilowatts of the 13 kilowatts out of this battery. So this battery would be quite a good size to support that theoretical household that we were talking about before. And the reason I chose that theoretical size is that's about the size of my energy usage here. It works out somewhere around 20 kilowatt hours a day. So this system works really well for me. I've never fully depleted the battery. It's always managed to deal with the load that I have in the evenings, and it integrates really well with everything that's happening in the household. The other thing that I like about the Powerwall is that it'll work anywhere, and it's transportable in a sense. So if I was to move house, I could take this Powerwall with me and install it in my new home. And even if my new home had no solar, that would be fine. This could be wired straight into my switchboard, and it would work from day one using energy from the grid to charge the battery and provide backup support to my house. The other thing I like about it is that this is a very slimline box. So this box only comes off the wall by about 200 millimeters. Whereas every other battery system that I've looked at, they come in these cubic boxes that are designed to stack on top of each other, and you can finish up with something that looks like a refrigerator in the corner of your garage. That's a problem for me because my garage is also my workshop. I like to do a lot of woodworking, and I have lots of tools and machines. And every bit of floor space is valuable to me, so I don't want it taken with a battery. This system is nice and slim, it hangs on the wall, it doesn't get in the way, you're not going to bump into it. It's a really good footprint for a battery system, and as far as I know, Tesla's the only company that makes such a slimline design. So are there any disadvantages to the Tesla Powerwall? Well, I mentioned earlier that there's a 5 kilowatt inverter built into that battery, and that inverter size limits the maximum charge and discharge rate from that battery system. It means when you're charging the battery, it can only be charged at a maximum of 5 kilowatts. Now my inverter on my wall is an 8 kilowatt inverter, and it can generate, particularly at this time of year in the summer, a full 8 kilowatts of power. It would be nice if those 8 kilowatts could go to the battery and charge it at that rate, but it can't because the inverter built into the battery system can only process 5 kilowatts of power. So the maximum charge rate is 5 kilowatts. On the other hand, the maximum discharge rate is also 5 kilowatts. So it can only convert a maximum of 5 kilowatts of energy to AC current to supply my home during a blackout. So when the installer comes to install your Powerwall, they'll have a conversation with you about what loads are connected, and they'll get you to make a choice on which ones need to be supported in a blackout. So in my case, everything is backed up except for my air conditioning. Now that's not really a problem to me because I wouldn't run my air conditioner during a blackout, as it would deplete the battery too quickly and it might run out before the blackout finishes. So that's not a problem to me. Compare that to a hybrid system or a system with a hybrid inverter. The maximum charge and discharge rate on that is limited by the hybrid inverter capacity. So if my 8 kilowatt inverter on my wall was actually a hybrid inverter with a DC coupled battery, it could charge the battery at 8 kilowatts and it could discharge the battery at 8 kilowatts and provide 8 kilowatts of load support to my home during a blackout. Now I believe Tesla's new Generation 3 Powerwall, the Powerwall 3, that's just launched in America and will soon be available in Australia, actually has a higher charge-discharge limit of 11.5 kilowatts. So when that arrives, that'll be nice because then you could actually run your air conditioner off it as well. However, as I said, I wouldn't be doing that because you wouldn't want to deplete the battery before the blackout finishes. The other thing about it is that it's only a single phase system. Now I have a 3-phase house here, but the Powerwall only has a single phase inverter built into it, and thus it can only be connected to a single phase for the purpose of backing up. So it can connect fine to a 3-phase house, that's no problem, but when it's in backup mode, it will only support 1 phase. So again, that can limit which appliances in your house are going to be backed up. Setting aside Tesla Powerwall specific issues, AC coupled battery systems in general do suffer from an efficiency problem. Let me explain. If you imagine the electrons that have to come off your roof and get to your battery to charge the battery, then the pathway they will follow with an AC coupled system takes them through two inverters. So firstly, they're going to come through as a DC current to the string inverter on the wall of my garage and be converted from DC to AC. They'll then flow into the second inverter, which is the inverter inside the Powerwall, and be converted back from AC to DC. So you can see this is quite an inefficient way of doing things. However, that said, the general efficiency of inverters these days is very high. They typically operate around 98% efficiency. So even crossing those two inverters, you're probably going to lose 4% of the energy. Now, typically I'm going to put 10 kilowatt hours of energy into the battery each day. So 4% of that would be 0.4 of a kilowatt hour. And if you price that at the average grid price of say 40 cents a kilowatt hour, you're really talking about 16 cents worth of energy that you lose. But of course you don't lose it because it came from the solar panels originally, so it didn't actually cost you anything. For my money, this is not really a concern. I know a lot of people make an issue of it, but it's inconsequential as far as I can tell, but maybe that's me, maybe I'm just a bit too easygoing. What are your thoughts on that? So what are the disadvantages of a DC coupled system with a hybrid inverter? Well, the main one is around compatibility. So these hybrid inverters have a limited range of batteries that they will work with and vice versa. So it's very important to match the inverter to the battery brand and make sure that they'll play nice together. Generally, that's not a problem because the person who's doing the installation will make sure that the two devices are compatible. But where it can be a problem is during the warranty period. If you have a problem, well, the battery manufacturer is going to blame the inverter manufacturer, and the inverter manufacturer is going to blame the battery manufacturer. And you can get caught up in this blame game, which is never pleasant. I guess the other reservation I have with it is you're also going to have different apps. You'll have an app for your battery and you'll have a different app for your inverter, and you know, you're going to have to jump in and out of them, and they probably look and feel quite different, and it's not going to be nearly as seamless as having one app. So with the Tesla Powerwall, I've got one app on my phone, and when I open up my car app, it tells me all of the information I need to know about my car, and all I need to do is just swipe to the left and I can see all the information I need to know about the battery system. So it's totally seamless jumping between the two systems, and it's a really intuitive app like everything that Tesla does. So it's very easy to see what's going on and get your head around it. It also has great reporting on not just the energy that you've used, but also the savings that you've made. As I showed in my car video, it calculates for you how much money you've saved against using a petrol car, and with the battery app, it'll show you how much energy you've saved as opposed to taking your energy from the grid, which is really nice. If you watched my earlier video on solar PV systems, you'll recall that I did a payback calculation using the levelized cost of energy method. So I can do that now on this battery system, and you'll see the results are quite different. Now I'm going to do a 10-year calculation because that's the warranty period on the battery system, but it's important to note that these modern battery systems have very sophisticated battery management and cooling systems, so they're likely to last much longer than 10 years. But to be conservative, we'll use a 10-year time frame. So the upfront cost of this battery system was $13,000, which is approximately $1 per watt hour of storage. There's zero maintenance on a battery system. They don't require any maintenance at all. So the total lifetime cost over the 10 years will be the $13,000. In terms of energy yield, I'm going to make an assumption here that I will discharge the battery down to 20% each day, each evening, and then I'll recharge it the next day. So I'm going to be using 80% of the storage capacity every day. So that equates to 10.8 kilowatt hours daily, and that would be 3,942 kilowatt hours yearly, and over the 10 years, 39,420 kilowatt hours. So it's easy enough now to do the LCOE calculation. It's simply $13,000 divided by 39420, which gives us an average of 33 cents a kilowatt hour for the cost of that energy. Now, that compares favourably to my average grid tariff at the moment, which is 40 cents a kilowatt hour. It's not a fantastic difference, but it's on the right side of the ledger. But of course, one thing you need to remember is that when I'm using this energy is in the peak hour each evening between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. And in that peak hour, the energy tariff peaks as well. So my energy tariff in that window is 54 cents a kilowatt hour. So in actual fact, there's a 21 cent differential between what I'm paying for this energy compared to what I'm paying for energy out of the grid. Now you will get a payback on this system, but the time frame will be quite a long one. If you do the maths, it works out around about 16 years. That's probably longer than most people would like, but for me, as I've said, my objectives are not just financial, and I'm happy with the 16-year payback. So which system is best? Well, I'm not going to answer that because it depends on your circumstances, but hopefully you've gleaned a bit of knowledge from this presentation today, and you'll be able to ask some more educated questions of any salesperson that you talk to and make a sensible decision about what's best for you. There's just one last thing I wanted to cover off though, and that is future proofing. So I have a friend that I work with, and she's currently getting quotes to put solar panels on her roof, and she's told the installers that she wants the option to be able to add a battery later on. I was looking at one of the quotes that came back, and it's a PV system with a hybrid inverter, which sort of makes sense, and it seems like, yeah, that's future-proofing the solution. But consider this, if she doesn't pull the trigger on that new battery for, say, another 5 years, well, we'll be into an entirely different generation of hardware by then, and there's probably a high probability that that battery in 5 years' time won't be compatible with a hybrid inverter from today. So it may be best, if you're in that situation and you don't know that you're going to be adding a battery in, say, the next 12 months, you're probably best just to install a standard string inverter and panels, and then when you do come to do a battery, just go and buy an AC coupled battery like the Tesla Powerwall, and that'll be compatible with whatever you've got. So that's it for today. We've covered a lot. We've gone into the weeds a little bit technically, but I think it's important to understand how these systems work if you're seriously considering buying a battery system for your home. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode. If you have any questions or I haven't clarified anything properly, please put your questions in the comments section, and I guarantee I will answer them. I always read my comments and I always respond. In the meantime, I hope you have a great electric life.